So here's our agenda for today. And, we're going to do a little introduction. I'll share a little bit about Brian. I'll share a little about me. We're going to do this thing called taking responsibility. This is a little bonus thing. It's about attitude because the reality is, and I won't go into all the details, but the reality is that the studies show 85% of our success, any success, has to do with the attitude, has to do with our behaviors. And so I'm going to share a little thing about attitude and behaviors. Then we're going to get into the actual components of communication. We'll talk about this universal language of DISC, and then how do you apply that? We'll identify the different styles that you get. And then we're going to give you a style identification exercise. So how do you identify what your style is? And I'm going to walk you through that, and you can do that on a scratch pad. But if you download or if you looked at that Communicating for Success worksheet, there's a little page in there that's all about style identification exercise. And then we'll have some time for questions and takeaways. All right. So focal point, we talk about who is focal point and why are we here. And the reality, this is Brian Tracy. Now, Brian's in his mid-70s now. He is an author. He's the founder of Focal Point. He's been in business for 40 years. He's, and actually some of this information I think is a little bit older. He's written over 70 books. The Focal Point organization has 200 coaches around the world. We're on 6 continents, not in Antarctica, but all the other 6 continents. He does a lot of speaking. He's trained over 2 million salespeople. It's just very noted author. And I became aware of and engaged and sort of almost a disciple of Brian's way back in my early coaching career. I just really enjoy the way he thinks about things and the way he is able to present information and knowledge in a very simple and easy to understand manner. All right. Okay, so Business Wit, that's the name of my company. We are a Focal Point franchise. That's me. I've got a bunch of different resources that help me, Patty being one, a couple other folks in the video space because I do a lot of that kind of thing. I've been in the coaching practice space for about 16 years because I was in the corporate space and corporate coaching and training space for a long time. And the last 7 years, this is my 7th year with the Focal Point organization. And I got to be honest with you, I had no idea what this coaching business was really all about. I knew that I could teach and I could train and I had done that kind of thing. But the place where I've really gained some information is the community of coaches. I spend time with all of them once a year at a conference. And gosh, I just continue to learn new ideas and grow my knowledge and my experience and my practice, and allows me to then share that kind of stuff with my network. And it's just been really wonderful. So in my background, I'm a chess player. I have a tendency, I played competitive chess in high school and I traveled around the United States and competed in tournaments. And so my phrase is make the right moves. When you make the right moves, you're going to be a lot more successful and you're going to get the results that you want. And the results most of us want, if you're in business, the result we want is typically money. Now there's some other results that are important, but that's typically it. And we want money so that we can have the time and financial freedom that allows us to live the life that we want to live for ourselves and for our family and for the future. And there's another component that's really important to me, because if you're fortunate enough to make more than you need, then you can make a contribution to the less fortunate. And we know the less fortunate out there, and we know they need help. And you can make that contribution to the less fortunate, and you can leave a legacy. And that's the goosebump moment. That's that thing that really makes me excited and makes me really value what it is that I do, is because I help and I work with people that really want to get to that point where they're leaving a legacy, where they're able to help the less fortunate and make a difference in the world. Because I think while money is certainly not the root of all evil, right? The love of money is the root of all evil. Money does a lot of amazing things. And if you get good at it, then you can make some amazing things happen. All right, so that's kind of my story about John, and I've been coaching for a long time. I do a lot of different things. I spend a lot of time in the construction space, the technology space, the sales space. I've been in the sales space since I was 8 years old. I was selling popcorn at Little League baseball games, and because I wanted money to buy comic books, and we didn't have much money. So that's kind of how I got into that. I've been doing this stuff for a long time, and really, the ability for me to make a contribution it's very, very significant. I'm excited for it. All right, so we're going to go through this thing called taking responsibility, and this is an attitude component. This is about having the right attitude. Now, we've just drawn this line called problems. And here's the thing about problems. You don't get to decide when they show up. You don't get to decide when you get in a car accident. You don't get to decide when the weather does something wacko. You just don't get it, right? Your job is to effectively respond to those problems. And now, in many ways, that response is going to include some communication. So that's why this is a component of what we're talking about here today. And we're going to talk about the right way and the wrong way to respond to problems. And because we always have them, right? It's all about that space and time between when the problem shows up and what we decide to do. What we decide to do is going to affect the success of our results. All right. So we're going to talk about this as in above the problem line and below the problem line. And above the problem line is a little acronym. And remember, everything that you see in here today, you can take and you can reuse. And I want you to take it and I want you to reuse it. And I want you to share it because I think it'll make a difference for you. And I think it'll make a difference for the people that you share it with. So above the line is this acronym called PROVE, right? And PROVE, the response, this is the right response. This is the effective response to a problem, right? So proactive, right? We're going to take action. Ideally, we're going to think in advance and strategize and identify the potential problems that are coming up, but we're going to be proactive, right? We're going to be responsible. We're going to take responsibility for anything and everything that happens around us, not somebody else, us. What are we going to do? We can control 100% of who we are and what we do and what our response is. And we're going to take that responsibility and we're going to own it, right? We're going to own our responses. We're going to own the good ones, the bad ones, the middle ones. We're going to take ownership. And we're going to have a vision. In other words, we want it to be better. We want it to be more effective. We want it to be different. It's not just status quo, stay where it is today. And ultimately, this thing called excellence, which means we're going to do our best. We're going to do our best, regardless of the situation. Now, there might be some constraints. We might not have a lot of money. And so we're going to do the best we can with the money that we have. We might not have a lot of time. So we're going to do the best we can with the time that we have. We're not going to do second-rate or half-baked activity. We're going to do the best we can. And if you respond to problems in this manner and in this fashion, I think you're going to be highly, highly successful, right? This is the guy. That's the attitude we want. We want that guy. That's the champion, right? Now, below the line, what's the opposite of that, right? The opposite of that is this acronym called BENS. And BENS, these are people that kind of float and bend along with the wind, but whenever a problem happens, they have a tendency to blame somebody else. And they make excuses for not getting stuff done. And often they're very negative. They say, I can't do that, or you can't do that, or that's impossible, or I just don't have the talent, right? That's not going to get you anywhere. And then we have this thing called denial. Denial is this component that says, hey, I see my life is, but they're not recognizing what's going on. Everybody else around them can see what's going on, but they can't see it. And that's the nice part of denial. The more negative part of denial is, they deny that they did something that they shouldn't have done, or they deny that they didn't do something that they should have done. And that's called lying. And lying doesn't work. That's not an effective response, right? And ultimately, we have this concept called scarcity. Now, scarcity in the sales model, it essentially, when there's less of something, it drives the price up. And typically, that's the law of supply and demand. But scarcity in the behavioral responsibility model is that position where you say there's not enough, so I'm not going to even try. I'm not going to compete. I'm not going to go after it. I'm not going to learn. I'm not going to do anything. That scarcity model says that there's no value in me doing that kind of thing, so I'm not going to do anything. And those are the places where you really get into trouble, where you can't, you're likely not going to be successful in your response, right? And this is the guy that kind of wanders around and mopes and complains and does all those kinds of things, right? So above line, we call them victor. You could call them winners. You could call them a lot of different lines, right? But they are opportunity seekers. They take lemons and make lemonade. And then below the line, we have these things called failure magnets. And for whatever reason, because of their response, it just kind of follows them around. Now, what I want to do is I want to share something with you that's really important. Now, I think everybody agrees here that being above the line, and we can say that's above the line behavior, as opposed to calling people victors or victims, right? We can use this word called above the line and below the line behavior. We all agree that above the line behavior is going to be much more successful and much more effective. But the question is, can you be there? Can you be above the line 100% of the time? Now, if we were live, I would get some feedback. And so because we're not, I want to continue this on. And the reality is that life happens. Life throws us curveballs. Again, we don't get to decide when we get into a car accident. We don't get to decide stuff. And there are times when there's some real bummer stuff that's going to happen, and our attitude and our energy will slip below the line. And that's okay. It's normal. It's life. But your job now that you understand this model is to recognize that that's what's happening, and then to fight and scratch and claw and get back above the line. Get over it. You have to figure out how to get over it, because if you get stuck there, well, you can see where that would be. That's just not a very effective position. Now, sometimes you get down into that space and it's really a bummer. It's a big thing. And getting back above the line is not something you can do by yourself. And if that's the case, then you raise your hand and you get some help, and you go get somebody to help you get back above the line. Now, conversely, when we're working with our team and our friends and our environment, and we all agree that we want to be the victors, we want to have this right attitude, we want to have that space. When we see somebody that's operating below the line and we know they believe in the above the line model, then we have a responsibility to go find out what's going on and see if we can't help them get back above the line. In which case, we're always moving people above the line and helping them get to be above the line and helping them to be more effective. And those people that don't want to get above the line, they will start to stick out like a sore red thumb. And it'll be very obvious. It'll be very clear that something else has to happen. And the other thing I will share here is that below the line behavior, that victim behavior, you have to be really, really cautious, and you need to catch it right away, because it's contagious. When people see that behavior happening and not being addressed, then they'll start to adopt that behavior as well. So it's very contagious. So I encourage all of you to adopt the victor responsibility, to adopt the victor model, to stay away from the victim, and help people move from that below the line space to the above the line space, right? Do not be the victim and try to help everybody else stay away from that victim mindset. It's just a train wreck. And we can make a difference on the planet just by elevating people to above the line behavior. All right, so let's talk about conversations, right? There's some conversations where, you're just kind of engaged and it's kind of natural and it feels comfortable and it's easy, right? You're connected. And then there are other conversations that, they're just the topic and everything else is just fun. And that there's energy and there's appreciation. And I know everybody on this line on this call on this webinar has experienced that kind of thing. And then we have these kind of conversations, right? They're not quite as comfortable. They're not quite as easy, right? They're uncomfortable, and sometimes they're annoying. Annoying, one of my favorite words. I get annoyed, and I have to admit it. It's just part of me. But some conversations are uncomfortable. And then sometimes it feels as if you're really not being heard. Right? Some people really aren't listening. They're not really paying attention, right? You're not being heard. But ultimately, what we really want is this engagement, listening, sharing position, because that's where energy, activity, and positive change starts to occur. So we're going to talk about these behavior models, because that's really what we're going to talk about DISC, and I'll get into the details here. So behavior models have been around for a long time. Now, DISC was created by a guy by the name of Thomas Marston, and he wrote a book called The Emotions of Normal People in 1924. So it's been around for a while, almost 100 years now. And to be honest with you, and he's a psychologist. Most psychologists, most psychology documents and books are about abnormal people. But Dr. Marston was really interested in about the rest of us. What does that really mean? And for many people, and again, since 400 BC, people have been trying to figure out what are these models of people and behavior. And Marston, I said 1924, maybe it was 1928. What he did is he said, okay, everybody has 4 categories of behavior. Dominance being, how do they respond to issues and challenges? How do you respond to problems? There's an aggressive approach, and then there's a cautious and strategic approach. How do you respond to, what are your preferences for influencing others? Some of it's verbal and some of it's logical. Steadiness has to do with the pace of change. How much variety do you or don't you like in life? Some people like more, some people like less. And then compliance has to do with rules and procedures. How much do you like the rules and procedures that are set by others? All right. So DISC has been around for a long, long time, and I personally, I use it with every single client that I get engaged with. But it's been in the corporate world for years, and you can see all kinds of different organizations that have used it. And it's been effective in helping to identify and leverage behaviors and communication styles in the corporate world since it's gotten started. You can see there's a lot of folks that use it. All right, so Lee Iacocca, he's the guy that rescued Chrysler, and he talks about how communication is really everything. And if you think about how much time that you spend actually communicating in your day-to-day basis. Now, communication works at work, but it works at home, and it works with your friends, and it works in your network, and it works at the little league game, but it works everywhere. So just it's pervasive, and the more effective you are at communicating your message. And remember, we've all played that telephone game where you tell one person a sentence, and he has to tell the next person, he has to tell the next person. By the time he gets to the 15th person, the statement is entirely different than what it was, and that's because there are 4 pieces to communication. The first piece is what I think in my head, and the second piece is what I share and communicate with you, the words that I use, and then there's the words you hear. That's the third piece, and the fourth piece is how did you interpret those words. And with the diversity and cultures and accents and everything that's in business and around us today, it's super easy to get that messed up. Just goes to show, really just how absolutely critical it really is. So here's what, you think about from a communication standpoint. And we'd love to have all of these things happen. And this is what, if you could strategize every day, every time you start going into a conversation, what you're trying to get accomplished, these are the kinds of things that you would identify. It's about connecting. Trust, super, super important, right? Listening, when you listen, it helps to build trust. It's about being heard. Did somebody else hear us? And then ultimately, what are the results that we want? Is it just a message? Are we looking for somebody to take some action? Are we looking for something to change, something different? All of those things are really, really important. All right, so when we talk about communication, there are, again, I told you there were 4 stages, right? What I thought, what I said, what you heard, and how you interpreted it. But then we have these components of communication. And when people see and hear communication, and what's interesting, right now you can hear me, but you can't see me. Hopefully you're hearing in my voice and my tone some energy and some excitement because I love doing this. Hopefully you understand the words that I'm using. But the reality is words are only 7% of communication. And tone is 38%. That's really, really big. And body language is 55%. So today, text messaging is prevalent. It's everywhere. And it doesn't do anything except for share the words. And words alone can be super misinterpreted. And they were talking about trying to use voice. And that's one of the reasons why emoticons are becoming so important and valuable, is because they add that extra component that you don't get with just words. And there's this thing about capitalizing, which is more of a shouting, loud tone. But emoticons have come about because it helps to add some clarity in the communication model. But only 7% of the words. Only 7% of the words. Now, I don't know if you were familiar with Peter Drucker, but he's written lots of great books. Good to Great, In Search of Excellence played a role in both of those books. Very outstanding business reads if you're interested. But he talks about the most important thing in communication is to hear what isn't being said. And we've always looked at somebody, and it's really interesting. And just this morning, I had a conversation with a person who is very nice. And when I meet her and I talk to her, she's very nice, but she's very sharp in the way she communicates. Now, I happen to know her, so I know she doesn't mean anything by it, but she's really, really sharp, and she can be misinterpreted because it almost sounds like she's angry or mad whenever she makes a statement. And so she has to be really careful when she communicates with other people, because she might be communicating the wrong message, because that's the way you deliver that message could add more to it than the words. And so understanding what's not being said, or what are the other pieces, what are the other nuances that add on to that word statement that really help you understand what it means. All right, so this is one of the freakiest pictures out there, right? This eyeball in the ear, but it's really about listening with your eyes. Now, I've used other pictures, and I come back to this one because people remember this one. That's why this picture is in there. But it's about paying attention with your eyes, right? When you see facial features, when you see body language, when you see energy and excitement and hand motions or hands in pockets, we'll talk about what all those things mean here in a little bit, kind of share some of the stuff. But what's really important is that your eyes play a really big role in the communication model. Okay, so what universal language is, it's how we act. It's our way of doing things. It's how we like to do things. But when we understand the different behaviors that people have, not their personality, that's not it. It's then we can understand a lot more about them. It's neutral in the sense that there's no plus or minus. It's not right or wrong. There's nothing right or wrong. It's universal. It works around the world in every single culture, in every single country, and it's silent, right? It's about because you're watching, you're learning some other things other than just the words. Okay, I said it's not personality. It's not about skills and experience. Now, there are other assessments that measure these kinds of things. Not education. It's not an IQ test. It's not about values and beliefs. Again, there are other assessments that will do these kinds of things. This is just it's a tool and a model for identifying how you like to behave. How do you like to do things? How do you like to respond to things? All right, so where does it apply? So it's about, if you can get good at this, right, it certainly applies to communication, and that's really what we're talking about today. But when you think about management and leadership, well, you're communicating a lot. You gotta lead your team. Maybe you have to communicate up the organization ladder and down the organization ladder, or maybe you've got shareholders or stakeholders. Sales, communicating your message more effectively certainly plays a huge role. Teams and work groups, and we're doing a lot more with teams and work groups because we realize that a team of people can get more done than one individual can. But how do you organize and how do you structure that effectively? If we understood everybody's behavioral preferences and we could position them to where they could leverage their behavioral preferences, then everybody would be a little bit more energized, a little bit more engaged, and the likelihood is that we would accomplish a little bit more. Negotiation, kind of another type of sales concept. Recruitment and selection, right? Do they fit into this space, into this type of business, and this type of organization? We use these tools to help us identify whether candidates are effective in this particular job or that particular job, because certain behaviors fit certain jobs more effectively. And then clearly interpersonal relationships. Now, what's really interesting here, I've been exposed to DISC for, 20 years. I think I took it 3 or 4 times when I was back in my corporate days, and I've been using it again on a very routine basis throughout my corporate or my coaching practice. But I didn't have access to the tool. In other words, I couldn't give it out to anybody until I became a coach, right? And then I got a tool. We have a relationship with Target Training International that provides us this information. And so I gave the DISC assessment to, guess what? I gave it to my wife. And so we learned some things. That's interpersonal. I will tell you, that's interpersonal relationships. And, I learn new things every day when I talk to my wife. I have to keep an open mind. But it's really fascinating how that works, right? And my youngest is 21, oldest is 29. I have one getting married in November. Pretty excited about that. But even they understand how this model works. It works, that interpersonal thing, really, really effective. Okay, so there's only 4 styles that you really need to understand. And we're going to go through each one of these. So as we look at this, the observable behavioral styles, right? There is the director style. This is the dominant style. Now, everybody has all 4 characteristics: dominance, influence, steadiness, and compliance. They all have all 4 characteristics in some form or fashion. But they all have a primary, or one that is their ideal communication preference. Ideal communication preference. And what we do is we've labeled that here. In this case here, we say there's a director. And the director level communication preference is 17% of the population. So 17% of the population use their director preference to manage their communication. That's their go-to location. All right, now the influencer. Now the influencer, this is how you interact with others and how do you attempt to influence others to your point of view. and 38% of the population is uses this influencer preference, this influencer style. And this influencer style is, in this particular style, is a verbal, charismatic influencing process, the opposite of which is logic and facts. And we'll get into that in just a little bit. All right, steady relator, 32% of the population. Now this means that 32%, and this is the part of the population that prefers less change. Now on the scale that I'm going to show you here in a little bit, the farther away from the center, the more intense the behavior. But in this particular case, 32% of the population, they use this steady relator communication style. And then ultimately we have the compliant analyzer, which is how you respond to the rules and procedures set by others. And about 13% of the people use this behavioral style, right? So before we're finished today, you're going to understand what your style is, and you're also going to understand how to identify other people's style. When I say how you identify other people's style, I'm going to give you a solution and a process that will help you identify that information in the first 60 to 180 seconds of meeting anybody on the planet. There's a process that we use to help to dial this in. All right, there we go. We talked about understanding your own behavioral style. So I jumped ahead in the slides. Recognizing the behavioral style of others. And then, so that's the one thing you want to do is you want to recognize somebody else's style. But here's the thing, is that you want to communicate to them in the style that they prefer. If you meet them in their comfort zone, they're going to be more comfortable. They're going to spend more attention. They're going to spend more time. They're going to be more engaged. And so learning how to adapt, because maybe yours is a natural D, maybe yours is a natural I style. But if you're talking to another I, fine, you can use your natural style. But if it's somebody else, a little adaptation on your behalf, and you're in control, you can make the change. You can't make somebody else change, but a little adaptation on your behalf can make a difference in your communication. And so we'll talk about some of those tips as well. All right, so there are two behavioral styles. There's the natural style. This is your comfort zone. If left on your own and you could do it any way you wanted to do it, this is what you would choose. And this is the place that we want to find the meat. We want to find somebody's natural style. This is where they're most comfortable. And then we have the adapted style, which is, how do you have to act and operate in your present environment? It requires you to do the job. And we all have to adapt at our jobs. There's some things that we need to do. We need to be a little more assertive, maybe a little more aggressive, maybe a little more logical. We got to follow the rules. We have to do that. But that's what we have to do at work. We're adjusting, we're adapting, we're modifying our behavior. Our comfort zone is in the natural style. Okay, so what does D mean? Style D, right? Here are the key characteristics of a D, right? So, you can take a look on the left-hand side, and people like this. I mean, people like every one of these. In fact, you could probably make a list right now of 2 or 3 people that have those key characteristics, right? That direct bottom line. But remember, it's not at work. So there are a lot of people that have to have these behaviors because they're leaders at work, and you need those kinds of things to be effective at work. The question is, do they have those behaviors at home when they're left on their own? Right? And those are things that you could recognize probably fairly quickly and easily. And then identifiers, right? Fast, they talk quick, they lean in. These are people that are pretty happy with risk. They're the people that are go and do, and they learn by going and doing. They're not as much on the strategy and caution side. They have a lot of confidence, high ego strength, direct eye contact. So those are things that you would use to recognize a D. And then you can look at the the communication styles, right? So how should you communicate with somebody like this? So you recognize this person, this is who they are, and the key is here, it's direct and brief. They're busy, they don't have a lot of time. It's really important that they win. They're very competitive. You have to give them opportunities and challenges and options. Those are all really important do's. And if you don't do those things, not the end of the world, right? But over on the right, you see that box that says don'ts, right? Those are things that will allow you to train wreck this conversation, and you got to stay away from those. So if you don't do the do's, right? If for some reason you're not right on those, you're probably okay. If you do them, you're going to have a better conversation. If If you don't do them, you're probably okay. But if you go into that don'ts category, then you're probably in big trouble. That conversation's not going very far, right? And it talks about touching them or encroaching on their space. They're not, this is not the emotional guy, right? And remember, this is in their natural state, not just their work state. And they need to be a component of the conversation. So really important to understand what the D does, what they need. And there's books and all kinds of information if you're interested in more than that. What you could do on the evaluation form is you could write down something like, I want some more information on this, or I want some more information on that, and I'll find a way to get it to you, because I think we've got your email address from your registration, and Patty can get that out to you. So if there's something in particular you'd like about this, let me know. Write it down on that evaluation form and send it to me. I've got all kinds of tools to help you if you have an interest in that fashion. Okay, so now we got the influencing style. And again, there's some great characteristics. You know some people about that. You know, these are enthusiastic. Their key emotion is optimism. Friendly, emotional, open-minded, trusting. Those are all really good. Some of the identifiers, right? What are you seeing with your eyes? This is pretty funny. I love this. Disorganized, lots of piles, trendy. This thing with standing with two hands in the pockets, I didn't understand that when I first got it. But man, it is so real. You will see this everywhere you go. Do's, these guys are open to conversation. There's energy, there's, it's positive, it's smiles, it's fun. This is kind of what they like, but stay away from those don'ts, right? They're not big on details. Details are draining for this group of follow up in writing. That's much better with this group. Don't be negative. Don't downplay say, hey, you can't do that. That's impossible. That's just not going to fly in a conversation with this group. And clearly don't dominate the conversation. And really, that item on the bottom is really important. They love recognition and attention. It's something that floats their boat. They're motivated by it. And if you give them recognition and attention, then they're going to pay a lot more attention to what you have to say, very simply. Okay, steadiness. This has to do with the pace of change, right? And these are the people that have this high steadiness or the steadiness communication factor. They don't like a lot of change. They prefer systems. They like processes. They like to follow the steps. They like the results. Now, often these are what we call balancers too. They fit and they balance people out. Good listener, relaxed, team player, pretty, kind of mellow almost. The key emotion is almost no emotion. These guys are like the poker players of the world. And in fact, if you look at the identifiers on the right-hand side, you will almost always see, if you walk into their office, and in fact, I have a cheat sheet on Office, like what would you see in the office? If that's something you're interested in, I'll send it to you. Basically, if you walk in the office and it has this kind of stuff in, then you're seeing these types of different behaviors. But these guys have a lot of an office, usually with a lot of family pictures. Poker-faced, don't show a lot of emotion, very systematic, time-tested. They follow the rules, they follow the process. They get mad when other people don't follow the rules. So we talked about the do's. Okay, again, they're relaxed, kind of mellow. You got to slow down. And notice that my speech just slowed down. A lot of assurance. It's going to be okay. I'm going to be right here with you. These are people that need time to process, time to think and decide. And one of the problems they get into is that it seems like they're not paying attention because they didn't respond or get back to you right away. They're just processing. And if you know that that's their preferred style, it's okay. You understand it. If you don't know that, then sometimes it could be a little frustrating. And they need time to build trust. Now, on the right-hand side, any type of pressure, like you need to make a decision right now, is going to be uncomfortable for this style. They don't like sudden changes. And if you make a promise, you could have great excuses, but unless you broke your leg and had to go to the hospital, they're not going to be, really receptive to that kind of stuff. Okay, style C, compliance, right? So these are the analyticals, and look at the characteristics. And people like this, perfectionists. They're looking for the detailed facts. They have very high standards, very analytical. They love data. They love information. That's how they make their decisions. On the identifiers, see the functional office. There's some more information on that office space. So if that's something you're interested in, generally reserved, following the rules, accuracy, really, really important here. You better be accurate. You better be right. On the do's, now these guys love detailed, proven information. And you could tell that if you have detailed proven information, if you're talking to a C, they're going to get it. They love it. They're like, give it to me. And guess what? They're going to read it, right? But if you tried to push detailed proven information at an I, number one, they're not going to read it. And number two, they don't like it, right? They you know, they may have to have it, but we have to do it the right way. The C's need time to think and decide. Very big on quality, accuracy, the right answer, facts. And once again, on the right-hand side, you know, don't go into the personal. These aren't personal, emotional, not big on socializing. And don't keep information to yourself. They need you, want you to share information. It's really, really important. Okay, so here's a DISC quick exercise. Now, if you downloaded the little workbook, or, you know, there's 3 or 4 pages there, and I hope you were able to take some notes, and I hope it was helpful. Then there's this little, there's a page with this little DISC exercise on it. Now we're going to talk about how do you identify your style? How do you identify your style? Are you a D, an I, an S, or a C? All right, so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to draw this X. Now you can draw this out, or you can use a little drawing with a little image that's on the handout that you got there. First, on the left-hand side is you have reserved, and on the right-hand side is outgoing. Other terms that we use for that: introvert, extrovert, shy, expressive. You know, those are different things. In the middle, where the X meets or the cross meets, that's a 0. That's the 0 model. And all the way down at the end of that thing, all the way where the reserve sign, that's like a 10. And so you're just going to give yourself a rating from 0 to 10 on either the reserved side or the outgoing side, right? If you're a 5, it's right in the middle, but give yourself a rating of 0 to 10 on the reserved side or the outgoing side. All right, so in this case here, we're saying, hey guys, a little on the reserve side, maybe that's a 4. Okay, so you got a little X or a star there for you. And then we're going to take a look at the vertical line, the vertical line. So at the top is a task-oriented, and the bottom is people-oriented, right? So are you a person that likes to get tasks done? Or are you a person that likes to be with people? And again, 0 to 10 style, and put your X wherever you think it belongs, up on the task side or down on the people side. All right, and so here we're going to say, okay, this person here is a little more on the task-oriented side and a little more on the reserve side. Really, 2 questions you're asking yourself, and this is how you're going to identify other people, right? Are they reserved or outgoing? That's the first question you ask, and you may have to find out from them, like, what do you, and we want to know on their natural side, right? This is like when they're away from work, what is it that how do they like to behave, right? So when you're not working, what do you like to do, right? Are you like to hang out, you like to read a book, you like solo pursuits, you like pursuits with small groups of people, or you like to hang out with big people or with lots of people in big organizations and big groups? That would help you from a task standpoint, a people standpoint, reserved and outgoing. So you ask those questions to identify where they might fit on this particular chart. All right, and so then you're going to draw a line between your 2 X's. Simply like that. Draw a line between your 2 X's, and then this is how the chart looks like, right? So the top right box is a D, and the bottom right box is an I, bottom left box is an S, and the top left box is a C. So we want to know from yourself, you've identified now what your particular style is. If you'd like some more information and knowledge about that particular style, I have a little offer at the end here. If you want some more information on this, there's some real detailed work I do. And if you're interested, you can put that on the evaluation survey. But if you just like a document or some instructional materials, white papers that I have on some of these different things, again, put it on your evaluation form and get it off to Patty. And I'll be happy to provide that information for you. All right, so this is the quick exercise. This is how you identify your particular style. And this is how you identify other styles.